Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Purple Haze. Purple Haze is brought to you by Phalanx. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 16 and up, and games generally run about 1 to 12 hours. Yes, there's a campaign mode here, so this is why we say 12 hours. You look at the wrecked Huey. Thankfully you survived the crash. You got hit somewhere over the jungle. You lost the pilot. The gunner just fell out, gone. On your way down, you saw a glimpse of the other Huey. You think you got hit too, but you can't be sure. You look around at your squad, wild-eyed Marines fresh out of boot camp, and sigh heavily. You gotta move fast. The VC will be coming. Purple Haze is an immersive story creation campaign style game where players are dropped into the heart of darkness, Vietnam, 1967. You lead a squad of Marines through the dense jungles, flooded rice paddies, and straw-thatched villages of a war-torn country. Gut-wrenching choices will determine the fate of you and your mission, showing if you have what it takes to survive. It is in part a story creation game, in part a tactical combat game, and in part a campaign game. Your decisions determine the story, your tactics decide the outcome of life and death firefights. Your men will suffer, some won't make it home. Those that do will get wiser, get tougher. The goal is to complete the mission and get out alive. So, Purple Haze is very mission-based, and to win, you just have to complete each mission and survive, basically. But it is a bit of an RPG. You are going to be getting experience, upgrading your Marines. You do get attached to these Marines. It's really interesting how you get into the thick of it, and then you really become, attached to the narrative and to what the Marines are feeling and doing throughout. Now, this is obviously a war-driven game, so you have to keep that in mind. And the narrative in general, you have to understand that it is very much in line with what was happening at that time. It is going to be very adult-driven, so I'll only give you a little glimpse of the narrative because, there's a lot of strong language here and so forth. But the thing is, just know that going in. This is definitely a more adult game, and the theme in general is as well. So you do have an overall map that you're going to be traveling through, and there's different terrain types, and we'll dive into what some of the map stuff means in a minute, but I really want to touch on this narrative. There are different waypoints here that you can interact with, and those paragraphs, story paragraphs, are going to be in your book. And there's also encounter cards that are going to further story elements as well, but really the main mission story is all in your book. And you have some choose your own adventure stuff here. So to give you a touch of it, a flavor, without giving too much of the nitty gritty or some of the adult stuff, I do have a bit here. And I don't want to spoil too much of the story for you either, but you edge your way through the bushes, trying to be as quiet as possible. You know Charlie's out there. The sweat rolls down your brow and you feel a bug on your neck, but you try to ignore all of that. You need to keep calm, stay focused. One of your Marines creeps over to you and whispers, "Boss, we've got one ahead. He ain't seen us yet." You squint with your eyes, but you can't see anything. "What do you do?" asks the Marine. So as you can see, the narrative is very rich, very story driven, and there are branching paths, either from this one that gives you a choice on what to do, or perhaps you arrived at a location too late, causing a branching path to some other way. Now, you do have time elements in this game. There's a tracker that you'll be tracking your time through the forest, or through the jungle, I should say, and also into nighttime, which gets pretty scary. And then you've got your stamina track on the same board, as well as a threat level, and then your initiative when you go into combat. So this board is very important to keep track of all the things that are happening throughout the course of the mission. So let's take a close look at the Marines. You have your own profile card for each of the Marines, and there are 6 in play. They give you a nice loadout for these Marines for starting with. Now, they're all raw recruits, except for the medic, who's a level 1, which is crucial, believe me. And they show you on their loadouts what they are capable of using and carrying and so forth. But the main stats on their profile cards are going to show, like intelligence, health, mental health, things like that. And you're going to be rolling checks against some of that. And you've also got an activation token along with the gear that they're starting with. All kinds of different weapons, and as you search and move out through the jungle, you're potentially going to find more things, more ammo even. So keep that in mind. But the thing is that the nice thing is that this is an RPG style game, so you can level up these guys. They can be radio operators, they can be scouts, you know, and specialize into something as you upgrade their attachment card, so to say. And again, all these guys are raw recruits, so they're very basic to start with, which the first mission does level nicely because it is kind of an entry into the game. You're going after that Huey that crashed into the jungle and so forth. So it is very rich in story. So the basics of play. You're going to be moving on the overall map. You've got a single token that represents your Marines. Now, you can move orthogonal or diagonal, and you choose the different type of terrain based on how you moved. So there are 2 icons at the bottom of the square that you move into. If you move orthogonal, you choose the first one, diagonal is the second one. Then you consult the guide on the tracker. And based on what type of terrain it was, you'll move different time and different stamina. Stamina is key because at some point you're gonna have to rest and recover. But like if you move into the mountains, that's gonna take you more time. It takes you a full hour to move through mountains, and it'll cost you 4 in the stamina. So keep that in mind as you move across the different terrains and how you're doing for the different areas you're trying to get into. Now, also, along with time and stamina, you have threat. So you have to roll dice to see what the threat levels. Green, yellow, red will determine the number of threat spaces that you move. And at some point at the end of the track, you're gonna have to move into combat. So you be very mindful of where you're trudging through the jungle as well. And hopefully you roll well because there are encounter cards, and we'll take a look at those next. So these encounter cards are going to have story elements around them as well as you draw them, but they're going to do all kinds of different things. You might run into traps, you might have to search, you might run into animals, but there's various types of tests and things that are going to happen. You might run into the VC. But the thing here is that you will have to choose a Marine to do some of these tests. Like in this one, you're going to be searching the huts. And maybe we should check these shacks out, it says. But again, in the full game, you're gonna have more narrative and so forth. Here though, you're gonna be rolling against your intelligence. You have these blue trigger dice. I really like this mechanic in the game because it actually works really well. And the nice thing here is that it works basically the same way for combat. So the way you test for this card though is that you're gonna roll the 3 blue dice. These are called trigger dice. And then you have your red dice. You pick who has the best intelligence. Maybe you have someone who has 4, so you roll 4 red dice. You're trying to match what the blue dice are showing. And if you do match, then you have that many successes. However, there is opposition. So in this case, you roll that number of white dice as well, and you hope that the opposition doesn't have more successes than you. And then there's a nice guide along the side to see and show you how well you did in this roll-off. So that's the basics of how those cards work, but there's all kinds of different things here. Like it might just be down to a threat dice that was rolled. And it says, let's go guys this way. I think here's a shortcut. So again, the threat dice will determine, based on your roll of that, will determine what happens next in this particular encounter. But there are also some interesting things, fun things like, oh look, there's something up ahead. There's an animal of some sort. And here, a little monkey stole one of your equipment. You have to discard one of those based on the dice that you rolled again for threat. So encounter cards are very crucial to what's happening. They can really hurt you at times, but they can also really help you at times. And your other stats that you might have to test against are things like your survival skill, or your charisma, perception, intelligence, obviously, or your will. So all those different stats on your card will come into play, and how you choose your Marines to deal with those encounters. Now, as you move through the course of the game, you'll hit all those story elements, and then we get into combat. Combat is very interesting. So you draw the combat card, and you'll see right away that there are dice on the card. So you're gonna be placing white dice onto different spots, showing the different levels of strength in those areas of the jungle or forest or city that you happen to be in. And you want to double check the terrain type of the combat scenario, that it actually matches the area you're in. If it doesn't, draw a new card and go from there. The threat dice that was rolled, you may have to add additional VC. In the case here, if it's red or yellow, you add another dice to this card. Now, you'll see that there's triangles below each of the dice. That's basically the range to engage with them. So you're looking at your weapon cards for your Marines to see which Marines are best to use in the different areas of this combat scenario. Now, across the top of the card is some additional instructions for the scenario. In this case, it is called Pin Down, and our Marines in combat, 2 random Marines are going to be down 1 combat dice. Now, lots of icons in this game to learn, but they do become very intuitive. And over on the far right is your triggered dice. How many need to be rolled? You're basically trying to match those dice to get hits. And depending on the weapon you're using will determine how many dice you're rolling. And that brings us to initiative. Generally, the Marines are going to start first. You'll see in the track below, it starts at 0. And the thing here is that based on the weapon and how you use the weapon will determine where that ends up when you attack. So if we use this M16 and we do a mag dump, we grab the ammo, we get the maximum dice of 6, then we also see there's an explosion icon, which means we get to attack 2 areas. So we're going after these first 2 at the top, and we're going to try to hit both. So we're going to roll those dice, first rolling the blue dice, the 3 blue dice, to see what we need to hit. So we roll our 6 dice, and we try to match up everything there. Now, also, if you look at your card, you'll see a small icon or small dice icon next to the main one on your like M16 here. That means you get 1 reroll. So you roll once, then you take the dice and reroll again, whatever you want to reroll. Now, obviously you're going to keep the hits. You're trying to get as many hits as possible to reduce the pips on the dice that are in play on the combat scenario card. So we rolled pretty well. We actually got 5 hits of the 6 dice, and we can remove the 4 and reduce the 3 to 2. So that's pretty much how combat works. And then of course, because we used this M16 and we used the mag loadout, its maximum ability to hit multiple things, that means we move the initiative track by 5 into the VC area. So they get to go next. So as you eliminate the different VC, their dice are going to go on your combat track, which is going to give you additional abilities through the course of the game, like higher initiative and so forth. But then the VC get to go, and they're going to be drawing tokens from a bag. Now they've got tactic tokens in here, but the basic tokens are much like the weapons. You're going to be setting the initiative value, in this case it's 5, and they're going to be targeting 2 different Marines. So you're going to roll 2 dice to see who that is. It could be the same Marine, but they'll try to take that damage. Marines do have the ability to try and duck. They'll roll their dice and look for pairs. If they get pairs, they can avoid damage. Now, the thing is that they're going to take so many hits based on their health value before they actually get a wound. So in some of the cases, we've got 6, 7 different types of health here. But the thing is, you take those many hits and then you take a wound, and there's wound cards and so forth to dive into. So those are the basics of combat. Lots of different ways that can go based on the scenario card that you're engaging with and the different tactics that can be employed by the VC. And so you'll continue this way, moving along the map, encountering areas, doing different story elements and encounters, combat, and then finally you hope you've completed the mission in the time allotted and you got back to base. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, I know that they're adding a lot more story elements to the game. They're also adding more tactics and abilities, things your Marines can do to help counteract what the VC are doing and so forth. So the game is still evolving to some degree, and they've done a really good job. I like how the dice comparison and dice rolls work in this game, and how the VC have tokens to pull, how those scenarios play out. It's really interesting, and of course, the rich storytelling in the game is really engaging as well. But again, it is very adult, it is very thematic, so there's lots of language and there's lots of blood and gore, so to say, in the game. I mean, it is war after all. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.